With how good villains are at getting along, being kind to others, and sharing, it makes sense that they often end up at one another's throats. They aren't very good at any of those things, even when they seemingly share a common goal as well. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. Which two villains would you most like to see fight on the big screen? Number 10, Patton Parnell vs. Moreland. This one goes down pretty quickly in the comics, but we also get a lot of time to get attached, or afraid more like, of Patton Parnell before he meets his end, at least. Patton Parnell is an alternate of Spider-Man, but he couldn't be introduced at a worse time in the comics, in terms of his own self-preservation. He is introduced at a time when Moreland and the Inheritors are running rampant across the multiverse, killing spider totems. As such, just when Parnell's story seems to be reaching its horrifying conclusion, with him becoming a spider-human-monster hybrid and chasing after the girl of his dreams who he seems to now be inclined to possibly murder horribly, Moreland shows up. And he does what he does best, kill this spider totem, making Patton Parnell's story very short-lived. Which is good for his neighbor Sarah Jane in the moment, but unfortunate for us readers, as he was a super creepy villainous Spider-Man alternate, and personally I loved him. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please click that subscribe. Do it, do it, do it! Number 9, Joker vs. Red Skull. Oddly enough, despite being from two very different worlds, these two fought one another in the comic Batman and Captain America, a joint comic venture from both Marvel and DC, written by and with inks by John Byrne. While Batman and Captain America teamed up in the comics, also swapping sidekicks, so do their enemies, the Joker and Red Skull. However, when the Joker learns of Red Skull's bizarre patriotism and ideology, he swears to fight against him. On learning of the Skull's allegiance and Red Skull's offer for Joker to join him and his people, Joker responds by stating, "I may be a criminal lunatic, but I'm an American criminal lunatic." Despite his strong stance against the Red Skull and what he represents, however, Joker is pretty easily defeated here in this fight, being knocked out by one of Skull's goons before being dragged onto the plane to be taken back to Germany. Of course, they never do make it there, and Joker gets the last laugh in the end. Well, really the heroes get the last laugh in the end, but like many fights involving the standard Joker, this one against Red Skull is fairly one-sided. Number 8, Green Goblin vs. Sin Eater. I think the really cool thing about this fight is that in defeating Norman Osborn, Sin Eater also freed him. For Sin Eater, defeating a villain usually has to do with absolving them of their sin, which was exactly what happened here when Sin Eater finally caught up to Norman Osborn. Taking his gun, he fired and shot Norman directly, thereby removing his sin from him. Norman begged and pleaded to not be absolved because he claimed he wanted to beat his own demons by himself, but it turns out that this was likely not really Norman talking but the Green Goblin, who probably was just pleading to try and maintain his sense of evil. Number 7, Mephisto vs. Khonshu. While Mephisto doesn't end up as being permanently defeated, Khonshu, with his avatar Moon Knight, still manages to kill a hefty number of Mephistos. It turns out there are a bunch of different alternates, so Mephisto is able to just kinda like keep coming, but Khonshu, with stolen powers of the Avengers and the help of Moon Knight, ends up defeating 100 Mephistos in one day, which is wild. That's a lot of Mephistos. One is honestly a lot. And if you're wondering why Khonshu is being considered a villain here, it's because during this story arc, Age of Khonshu, he was actually kind of revealed to be one, acting in the name of justice but really taking over the world himself and then turning it into kind of like his own Egyptian underworld in the name of defeating Mephisto. Number 6, Dr. Doom vs. Morgan Le Fay. Doom is often one who believes he is more powerful than all, and in most cases, he's usually right, possessing a brilliant mind and extremely powerful will, and also being skilled in the use of magic. However, even with being a former student of Morgan Le Fay's, even his magic prowess is no match for her own. When Morgan learns that in the future her student and lover Victor will betray her, she decides to strike first. She travels through time to kill him, and although he attempts to stand against her, she very nearly succeeds in defeating him for good. But even though the Dark Avengers do come to stop her, the initial battle here is quick and painful for Doom before he ends up being rescued. Number 5, Killer Croc vs. Bane. Back in Batman issue 489, two heroes known for their strength and sometimes monstrous nature fought one another. And while they may have seemed more evenly matched on paper, one of them made quick work of the other. We are talking about the fight between Bane and Killer Croc, which happened in the pages of Batman back in the 1990s. While initially Killer Croc seems confident in this fight, things things quickly turn south after Bane breaks his arm. From there, Bane continues to basically kick his butt and leaves him knocked out and bleeding amongst a pile of toys in the Eden Park Mall. The crazy thing was that Bane and CROC didn't even really fight because they had beef, but more because Bane wanted to face Batman. However, Bane leaves after discovering that the Batman he's come across here is not the true Batman, but Jean-Paul Valley. Number 4. Ishmael Gregor vs. Black Adam. This one comes to us from the recent DC film released exclusively in theaters, Black Adam. The initial fight between these two characters is a fast and brutal one, thanks to Black Adam's rage. In this world, Black Adam is more pitched as an anti-hero, but in the comics, he has been known as a straight-up villain before. Although right now, I would say in the comics, he's also more of an anti-hero, so kinda makes sense. Still, even in the DCEU, this is a guy who has god-tier powers and who just straight up kills people who get in his way. In the case of Ishmael Gregor, he is the descendant of Black Adam's oldest enemy, the King of Kahndaq, who once oppressed his own people in search of greatness. When Ishmael seems to be trying to follow in his ancestors' footsteps and also kidnaps the son of Adriana Tomaz, Amon, both of whom are Teth Adam's allies, Black Adam loses it, emitting a powerful blast of electric energy that defeats Ishmael instantly. While this defeat is swift, it turns out that it's not permanent, however, as this may have been part of Ishmael's plan all along. This one comes from a super random place, but is a pretty intense fight between what are likely the two main baddies of the MCU thus far. In the comics Avengers Mech Strike issue number 4, Thanos is brought into this fight to face Kang, who the entire Avengers are basically up against. Unfortunately, despite Thanos' strength and brilliance, even he cannot defeat the Master of Time. All it takes is for Kang to lay his hands on Thanos and force him to experience the power Kang holds over time itself. He ages Thanos rapidly with his touch to the point that Thanos is no more than a skull, which is a creative way to kill him considering that Thanos was boasting of taking Kang's skull for his own trophy following their fight. Hahaha. Kang doesn't even plan to keep Thanos' skull either, tossing it on the ground and saying he doesn't need souvenirs to keep warm memories in his heart. It's kind of a weird thing to say when you kill someone, warm memories, but you know. The Avengers beat him back after this, but it's an impressive show of strength from Kang. Number 2. Joker vs. Poison Ivy. One of the most brutal fights in comics comes unsurprisingly from the world of Injustice, though more specifically we're talking about Injustice Year 0 issue number 8. Here Poison Ivy pays the Joker a visit to get revenge for the years of mistreatment towards his then ex, Harley Quinn. Ivy is inspired to do this after Harley reveals that she secretly had his daughter, and Ivy warns the Joker that if he ever hurts Harley again, she'll kill him. Despite the Joker threatening Ivy throughout this fight, it's very clear who has the real power between the two of them here. Number 1. GEIST vs. Magneto. GEIST vs. Magneto has to be one of my favorite all-time short-lived and brutal villain versus villain fights. Though really, between them, it's pretty apparent that GEIST is the real villain here, I think. Magneto ends up doing his best to catch GEIST and runs into him after he escapes punishment in Terra Verde in the late 80s Wolverine series. Magneto lures GEIST out with a little mechanical toy and makes short work of him. While his fate isn't explicitly shown on panel, considering that GEIST is a cyborg and Magneto is the master of magnetism, we can imagine how brutal this fight would be, and based on what we do see of what happens to the decoy robot toy, I think we know what's gonna happen there. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube. Bye!